Hope you've got a good frame on what metacognition and self-regulation is, and are able to keep in mind that in many ways it's two sides of the same coin, or remember the Tigger analogy. I'm sure that'll stick in your long-term memory. Now, it doesn't really matter about the terminology from a teaching and learning point of view, because what we're concerned about is how can we develop this capability, metacognition, self-regulation, so that students actually learn better. Because what we do know is that if they can do this well, it's a very useful capability for more effective learning. So let's just identify what the key component stages are of metacognition, self-regulated learning, and what they contribute to the learning process. Okay. Setting goals. We all know that if you've got clear goals, and if those goals are meaningful, achievable, challenging, it provides a good guide for enhancing our learning. Secondly, apart from being clear about what we want to learn, we've got to have some kind of learning strategy. In other words, what resources do we need? What do we know now? What do we need to learn? How to go about that learning, and what strategies are particularly useful. For example, when we learn stuff, we may read text, which means that we need to be able to extract information. We need to organize that information into a way that we can transfer it from working memory to long-term memory. And that's what we mean by a cognitive strategy, sometimes called a learning strategy or a thinking strategy. But it's essentially any resource or any tool technique that helps us to learn what we want to learn in order to meet our goals. And it's not just about cognition, it's also about, as a person, we have beliefs about things. We have beliefs about how well we can learn, and we have also beliefs about what's the best way to do it. And we also have emotions. Sometimes we just don't feel like doing stuff, or we in a negative kind of mood because of we might simply be tired, or there's some stress in our life. And what we know from a lot of research is that where people have limiting beliefs about themselves, in other words, they think that they're not particularly intelligent or they can't learn this topic, it will be a barrier to learning. And the same thing is, if we can't manage our emotions, often we talk about emotional intelligence in situations, but it's the same thing when you're learning stuff. You may kind of feel that you don't really want to do the stuff, that your mind's not there, but sometimes we have to kind of come down on ourselves and say, hold on a minute, you don't feel like doing this, but you need to do it. So managing beliefs and managing emotions is part of the self-regulatory process, and something that metacognition tunes into. And again, linked to that is that over a period of time we may get bored, we may go off track, and it's often difficult to maintain that personal discipline, the volition to say, right, okay, I don't feel like doing this, my mind's not there, and I feel maybe I can't do it. But that ability to say, hold on a minute, if I keep doing the right things in the learning process, because I understand how the learning process works, and it does go in peaks and troughs, and sometimes you put a lot of effort in, but you're not getting anywhere, and suddenly you got, I've got this big concept. So that ability to manage oneself when there's some challenges or setbacks. And again, in that process, as in learning anything, you've got to monitor what you're learning, how you're feeling, and reviewing your progress. Sometimes you might say, right, I've cracked that, I can now move on to this, or I'm still struggling with this important concept or skill, and I need to perhaps approach it differently. And that's where the metacognition comes in terms of, well, what else could I do? Do I go and see my tutor? Do I talk to some friends who might do this? Do I read a bit more? Do I do a bit more deliberate practice? So, if you look at this process of self-regulation, which is governed, I would argue, by our metacognitive capability, it should resonate with successful learning, because if you look back on your own success as a learner, you'll probably say, yeah, I did a lot of this stuff, and when I did it well, I learned, and maybe when I've not been so successful, it's because I wasn't able to self-regulate sufficiently well. I wasn't metacognitive in terms of an analysis of teaching strategies that are effective in terms of helping students to learn better, in terms of attainment. John Attie's famous research, Invisible Learning, that the effect size for using metacognitive strategies in terms of student attainment was 0.67. Now, you might not know what that means, so you can check it out yourself or go to one of my other tutorials, but it's a pretty good benefit in terms of learning attainment opportunity.